Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, frustration over Ghana's worst debt crisis in a generation bubbles over onto the streets. Thousands march in protest against the central bank governor they accuse of dismally mismanaging the economy. Also, as US President Joe Biden thanks his Kenyan counterpart for stepping up to lead a UN mission to Haiti, the UN Security Council has greenlit a deployment of a multinational force to help combat the gangs terrorizing Haitian civilians, but there are also mixed responses to the decision. And despite the hopeful signs in Benin that the country's making an impact when it comes to educational inclusivity for deaf kids, there's still a ways to go. We meet some of the children thriving at a rare school for the hearing impaired. But first, protesters in Ghana had the central bank governor in their sights on Tuesday. Thousands took to the streets demanding that Ernest Addison step down, as many blame him for contributing to a debt crisis that's seen the value of the currency plummet, the government left essentially bankrupt, the central bank posting record losses. Take a look.
Singing, dancing against high cost of living and lack of jobs. Hundreds of demonstrators were once again gathered in the Ghanaian capital, Accra, to protest against economic hardship. Ghana, one of the richest countries in West Africa, has been battling its worst economic crisis, marred by soaring inflation, a high cost of living crisis, and huge public debt. Many protests have been taking place across the country over the past year. This time, the anger turned on Ghana Central's bank, calling for the resignation of its governor, Ernest Addison, and his two deputies, after the institution posted a record loss of nearly 61 billion Ghanaian cedis in 2022. The protest, dubbed Occupy BOG, was led by the minority members of Ghana's parliament.
If the whole country needs 1 billion from the IMF every year for 3 years to fix our problem, and Edison in 1 year can superintend the loss of 5 billion, who is our problem?
So the way the economy is growing into a negative. There's no progress. There's nothing. If you're a Ghanaian now, you are you want to be a world person. The youth, they are suffering. The suffering is too much. The suffering is too much.
Last May, the cocoa and gold-rich country secured a $3 billion loan from the IMF to help get Ghana back on its feet. But many say too little was done to help those struggling to make ends meet.
There have been mixed reactions to the UN Security Council's approval of the deployment of a Kenyan-led armed force to Haiti. Now, the one-year mission would be to help the distressed Caribbean country battle the gang lords that have seized control of much of the nation. Nairobi said that its troops could head out in early January, but some Kenyans fear that their country can't spare the security personnel. Olivia Bizou brings us more from the Kenyan capital.
Plan is for Kenya to bring about peace, order and security to Haiti. But the big question is, will Kenya be able to succeed where others have failed? Now, Haiti's foreign minister is optimistic. He has called the plan a glimmer of hope for his country. But others are a lot more sceptical. Amnesty International, for example, has openly voiced its concern about the violence that Kenya's police used during anti-government protests earlier this year.
We've seen upwards of 107 people injured by police officers and over 50 deaths. And the concern has been that in many of those cases, there has been excessive and lethal use of force and even tear gas in schools and in people's homes, leading to the deaths of even minors. So I think there's real concerns that we would take that behavior onto an international stage.
Despite the criticism, Kenya has cited its record in peacekeeping operations in neighbouring Somalia and the Democratic Republic of Congo as a key reason for it to lead this mission. But it will not be going into it alone. Neighbouring countries, including the Bahamas and Jamaica, have also pledged to send troops. The US, meanwhile, has promised $100 million in support. Now, the force is expected to be in place by the end of this year.
Olivia Bizo there for us in Nairobi. Look now at some news in brief. Nigeria's top labour unions have postponed for 30 days a planned nationwide strike over the rising cost of living. The NLC and TUC are holding off on industrial action for now after President Bola Tinubu's offer of a package of measures that will give federal employees a €42 monthly pay increase for 6 months and also temporarily suspend VAT on diesel. Fuel costs in the country have tripled as inflation has rocketed up since Tinubu ended a fuel subsidy earlier this year. At least 18 people have died in Rivers State in southern Nigeria in an explosion at an illegal oil refinery. Rescue workers say that the blaze happened on Sunday. Locals fear that the toll could be higher than the official numbers, as dozens of people were reportedly taking spilt crude oil at the site when the accident happened. Oil theft is a major problem in the country. And still in Nigeria, at least 40 people are missing, presumed drowned after a passenger boat capsized in Kebbi State. Divers are still helping with the search for survivors. Rescue workers say the work has been made more difficult because of the strong currents that come with the rainy season. Now, Egypt's president has declared his candidacy for a third term in office this week. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is already widely expected to win the December polls. Our Edward Cousin tells us more from Cairo.
It did indeed not come as a surprise that Sisi would seek a third term. In fact, many Egyptians are convinced he will win the elections and stay in power. Not because he's so popular. Egypt is facing a severe economic crisis and food prices have increased by more than 70%. But many feel the vote would not make any difference or they see not a real alternative to Sisi. In previous elections, Sisi won by 97% of the votes. He became president in 2014 and in 2019 the constitution was amended so he could stay in power a third term. And also his terms were extended from 4 to 6 years. Sisi made his announcement at the closure of a conference that was broadcasted live on television. "I'm answering the call of the people," he said. During past days, pro-Sisi parties had set up stages all over Cairo and other cities for Sisi supporters to gather and celebrate his announcement. Fireworks were heard throughout the city on Monday night and the city is filled with banners in support of Sisi. However, on social media, videos were shared of protests in Marsa Matruh, a city on the Mediterranean coast, against Sisi. The government denied this protest happened. Sisi made some controversial statements at the conference. He said, "If hunger were the price for progress and development, then we will not eat and drink." He refers to his flagship projects here, national major construction projects that are supposed to catalyze modernization and progress in Egypt. Critics, however, say these projects have worsened Egypt's economic crisis.
Now, Benin is the only French-speaking West African country to offer classes catering specifically to the needs of deaf students from primary all the way up to high school. Despite the much-needed progress on inclusivity made over the last couple of decades in the country, access to education for the hearing impaired is still tricky. Our correspondents tell us more.
This is the Center for Reception, Education and Integration of the Deaf in Luo, in southern Benin. Here, deaf and hearing students learn together. Staff say that communication is not a problem. From kindergarten through to high school, classes are taught in both sign and spoken language to accommodate the hearing impaired children, who make up 45% of students.
In other schools, learning, training and teaching is dependent on the students' hearing. But here we do both. We develop the auditory and visual channels. So when a hearing child comes here, their visual channel is developed because they have to communicate with their deaf classmates.
The school offers courses in hairdressing, aesthetics, photography and sewing. Thierry graduated from the program before opening up his own hair salon. Although he is hearing impaired, his apprentices are not.
Currently, I have 3 apprentices. They are communication barriers. but it's important to show everyone that a deaf person is capable of doing anything.
Breaking barriers between hearing and hearing-impaired communities is at the core of Duria Dunsun's mission. The former student of the Deaf Center in Luo today teaches sign language to hearing people.
We are always willing to learn other foreign languages. Sign language is also a language. It is a means of communication and a tool that facilitates the integration of hearing-impaired people. This is where inclusion begins.
Last June, Benin's government passed a law requiring public companies to dedicate 5% of job vacancies to people with disabilities.
I love you. Voila. Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, though, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.